Welcome back, Sets in the CD heads. Don't worry, I'll never call you that again. Welcome to the third installment of our quest to unearth all of the most notorious and nefarious unreleased music. Today's adventure features the most convoluted and complicated stories behind tragically lost records, so listen closely if you don't want to get lost yourself. Although, honestly, these tales are fascinating enough that you just might. I know I did. This is episode 3 of the Sets in the CD Lost Music Deep Dive. These entries are made up of lost music media made by known artists, but with particularly convoluted or simply sketchy stories that are a little sus in justifying why it went missing in the first place. So let's dive in and find out. Here's one for all the opera lovers of the channel, whoever you are. And for the rest of you uncultured swines, here's some trivia to make you sound a little smarter. The first collaboration between the legendary opera duo W.S. Gilbert and Arthur Sullivan was Vespers, an opera that ran for 63 performances whose score is lost to time, and possibly consumption because it was the 1870s. The only surviving media is its libretto, a paper copy that included its plot and dialogue, but the opera's music is now completely lost. The sheet music was only released for 2 of the songs and no sound recordings survive, obviously, although attempts at reconstruction have been made. One of which was a 90s ballet, and judging by this footage, oh how I wish I'd been there to see that. Thankfully, we do have this next mysterious sample. So what is an unknown choir performing an unknown song doing on this list? Well, it ended up on a pretty well-known album that you're probably sick of hearing me talk about. The song was sampled by none other than The Caretaker, the electronic producer who's everywhere at the end of time, haunts your dreams and your TikTok For You page on the regular. The unknown choir performing the unknown song was sampled on the song Friends Past Reunited on his second album in 2001, A Stairway to the Stars. Apparently, Leyland Kirby, the real name of The Caretaker, has discussed there having only been 50 or 60 copies of the album originally, and haven't been unable to find any others. Maybe he just needs a little memory boost. Too soon? Is that too soon to say? That definitely can't be said for Jimi Hendrix's Black Gold. Black Gold is a 1970 solo demo tape recorded by Jimi Hendrix in his apartment. There is a possibility that he planned to use the music as the soundtrack for a loosely autobiographical animated feature, but that never got beyond the idea stage. Which is a shame. I mean, Zombie Simpsons is on its 30th season, and we don't even get one frame of trippy cartoon Jimmy? Life is unfair. 3 of the 16 songs, though, have been released in some form. A few were even heard outside of his inner circle, but remain almost completely unreleased otherwise. And sticking to Hendrix, I have avoided music videos and footage on our Iceberg because that's a whole other video's worth of entries, but this one's story is too bizarre for us to ignore. Footage was shot documenting Jimmy's short performance in the 1970 Winter Festival for Peace with his band, the Gypsy Sun and Rainbows. The result was a performance so disastrous that it led to the band disbanding. And if Hendrix can have a gig so bad, your band's probably doing fine. Jimmy was suffering from exhaustion and enduring the effects of a drink that had been laced with an unknown substance. He performed only 2 songs of the set before walking off stage. Drummer Buddy Miles claimed that he was his manager, Mike Jeffrey, who had slipped 2 tabs of LSD into Jimmy's drink to embarrass him and reform the Jimi Hendrix experience. Maybe the Hendrix animation movie should have been an anime. The only footage that has ever surfaced of this is a short 1-minute clip, although the full audio recording has been uploaded to YouTube. And I'm still salty that the next entry on our list hasn't. Before They Might Be Giants might have been giants, they were something else, and it's quite hard to describe, really. Don't Worry Kyoko is the second recording of band members John Linnell and John Flansburgh singing the famous Yoko Ono song while impersonating the voice of Rod Sterling of The Twilight Zone. Yeah, they might be drugs, guys. Flansburgh has since stated that he's not sure that the tape has survived, and he said he would not release it if it did anyway. Thankfully, They Might Be Giants did manage to be an indie rock band in the end. The Giants bit, however, remains to be seen. Someone who wasn't as successful with a full ensemble was Van Morrison. Van Morrison's album His Band and the Street Choir was originally made with a gospel choir that he called his Street Choir. It was to be released as only an a cappella session, but he was dissatisfied with the result and re-recorded the songs with a full band, hating all the extra work involved with the recording process. Oh, how I feel you, buddy. The only person who has apparently heard these tapes is Morrison himself. Though we don't think even he managed to cop a listen for the Rocky Horror sequel demos. Rocky Horror Shows His Heels was the first attempt at a sequel for the 1975 musical comedy The Rocky Horror Picture Show. Richard O'Brien's script focused on transsexual Transylvanian extraordinaire Frankenfurton's resurrection, and not-so-naive Janet being pregnant with Frank's child. Several characters from the movie were planned to return, but some of the actors weren't available, and director Jim Sherman claimed he was refusing because he didn't want to do the same movie twice. And I mean, I can't blame him, because I do the same thing with outfits. The movie was reworked into the Brad and Janet Show, which became the spin-off movie Shock Treatment. Several songs from the original Heel script were reworked, like Little Black Dress, which was going to be Frankenfurter's take on proper resurrection attire, and the song Looking for Trade, which mentioned the blood needed from young virgins to keep Rocky alive. A demo supposedly does exist with all of the songs from the original except for one. Who knows, it might turn up. Especially because I need to know what to wear when the next songs are resurrected. Like the track Never Let Your Daughter Date an Alien, from the unfilmed sequel Revenge of the Old Queen, which has yet to turn up. Just like the studio recording of the song I'm Not Dead Yet, performed by Richard O'Brien at an event in 2001, which he claimed was for another unmade sequel that also hasn't seen the light of day. And unfortunately, the next happenstance has been widely documented. During recording sessions for their album Gaucho, the jazz rock band Steely Dan had recorded one additional track known as the Second Arrangement. A favorite of engineer Roger Nichols, the song was tragically deleted by the junior assistant who was mixing it. When vocalist, keyboard player, and certified legend Donald Fagen heard the news, he was left speechless, leaving the studio without saying a word. I can't imagine what he would have said, really. The song was scrapped after numerous attempts to re-record it failed. A few bootlegged versions do exist on the internet, although they're incomplete, and it was performed in 2011 by another band called 12 Against Nature, but the finished version, thanks to her little friend, is lost. I still think about this one before I go to bed at night, and just how buttery smooth that bass line might have been. And for a rougher sound, recorded when he was just 15 at his Aunt Mary Earle's house in Washington, Kurt Cobain's first demo tape, Organized Confusion, used his guitar, his aunt's bass, his mother's pink suitcase, played with a set of wooden spoons to emulate drums. And they say Gen X was cynical. Hit me up when you're drumming on luggage without FL Studio Zoomers. The demo remained in Kurt's mother's possession, and she played them from Nick Broomfield to include in his Kurt and Courtney documentary, where a few seconds of it can be heard.
Bit of it here. Oh, do you want?
Sure, no, just play it.
Just play it.
Yeah.
And if you're inquiring about potentially releasing your own cover version of this track, yes, the suitcase has to be pink. Siona Dancing was a British synth-pop duo formed in 1982 by Bill McRae and Ricky Gervais. Yes, that, Ricky Gervais. Together, they recorded a 16-song demo tape and released a couple of singles and videos, but failed to chart and then disbanded in 1984, leaving Mr. Gervais to nurture a more well-suited career as a comedian? Is he?
What about the kids in Syria? What?
An actor who appears in comedies? Like, comedy adjacent? Anyway, in the Philippines, a radio station mislabeled the tape and played a song from it to a massive success just a year later, in 1985. It then became the unofficial anthem of the Filipino youth of the 80s, after its real identity was revealed. I guess that only goes to show you there's somewhere in the world for anything. The demo tape has never resurfaced, however, and Ricky doesn't really seem fond of the idea of ever putting it out there. Although I still think that when his career will need it, unearthing it will do absolutely no harm, compared to other moves he's pulled in the past.
And that annoyed just the right people, right?
The same cannot be said for In the Distance, the last final single by J-pop idol Yasuko Endo, the release of which was cancelled after the singer took her own life. The song was eventually re-recorded by Endo's producer Tetsuo Sakurai and released on one of his albums, but Endo's version and its B-sides have never surfaced, despite many copies having been sent at the time to different magazines for review purposes. And for another episode of Mysterious 80s Synthpop, Absolute was an 80s synthpop / electronic outfit. When they were 16, the members of the band claimed that they were working on new tracks for a possible upcoming album in 1986. While their label, Reset Records, which was owned by Eric Vince of Erasure, was struggling due to poor reception of previous releases and rapidly changing management, they moved forward with promoting and recording their experimental debut. They were teenagers, so this is a risk I hold them 100% financially responsible for. Some tracks were reworked with a darker sound compared to the earlier releases, one of which was going to be called The Return of the Funky Lizard, before switching to Watching You Tonight at the label's request. I can't imagine why. After touring and then being dropped by their label, the band finally disbanded. Seriously, after giving all that up, they still dropped them? Completely heartless. Absolute's history was lost to time and the band remained obscure, but a bad quality of the master's releases has since been posted by one of the band members. And I can only hope that the Funky Lizard returns, because it sounds awesome.
Come on, buddy. Come on, buddy.
And speaking of amazing animals, Five Star Command, believe it or not, is an electro-noise music group from the 90s not affiliated with the SpongeBob franchise or Devo. Their music consisted of heavily distorted and edited samples, DMX-fueled rambling, alien abduction testimonials, and other electronic gadgets. So honestly, not too far off from SpongeBob or Devo, really. But the story took a tragic turn. After co-founder Glenn Hobbs took his life in 1997, the bandmate Luke Howard became a professor of psychology and left the music world. A posthumous digital compilation was released, but only bootlegs to archive.org followed. Howard later claimed a crazy fan stole the masters, but an insider eventually got in touch with him and released some of the material to SoundCloud. Apparently, he's in the process of compiling material for a mega compilation, and hey, he's just in time for the Patrick Star Show. Like My Bloody Valentine, Slowdive was another shoegazing band with a tense relationship with Creation Records CEO Alan McKee, which led them to scrapping the entire original version of their sophomore album Souvlaki after he declared it was all shit. We all know how this went last time, so suffice to say, he was wrong. Out of the 25 tracks recorded, only 15 have surfaced on various bootleg releases, which got sparsely distributed by fans. Slowdive co-founder Neil Halstead has stated that he doesn't have the master tapes, but some are slowly making their way online, with one even being released in Spotify in 2021, called Sleeping. While I am wide awake, I'm still eager to hear the rest, guys, so let's hope that someday these ones surface. And maybe I can milk another 3-part series about the hurdles of making that happen, too. I'm eager to hear that, and almost as eager to hear the first independent cassette released by the Canadian post-rock pioneers Godspeed You Black Emperor, which was limited to 33 copies when it was first made public in 1994. After years of searching by online investigators, a Reddit user claimed Casket Jack claimed to have a copy that they were willing to release. Casket Jack did upload questionable audio from 2 tracks along with pictures of the cassette, but backed out of releasing more, citing fears about legal issues before mysteriously deleting his account, leading many to speculate that this was a hoax all along. Which was definitely not the case for Boom Crash Opera, an Australian 80s band which had taken a more experimental direction in the 90s. Their 1995 album Born was released in a double CD package with space for the second disc occupied by a paperslip that advised fans to look out for the follow-up, Born Again. While fans were eager to hear their new material, the group's record label didn't believe in them as much and dropped the band, becoming complicit in what has now become known as the most cruel act of cock-teasing to the Aussie music scene of all time. In an even more horrid twist of this ugly divorce, they kept the rights to the unreleased album, which to date has yet to make any kind of appearance at all. Just like Hail and Farewell Gothenburg, an album by indie folk band The Mountain Goats. originally recorded in 1995 and unfortunately mastered at an incorrect speed. While it was fully intended to be remastered and re-released later, the album was leaked without the band's consent before that could happen. Disheartened by it, in an era where leaks were an unprofitable death sentence, the Goats abandoned the project with no intention to ever release it as planned. And, well, it's the future now, so maybe streaming services will give this one a new lease on life. Although that definitely will not happen for the next unreleased in our list. Back in Attack was an attempt comeback album from the disgraced German pop duo Milli Vanilli, recorded in 1997. The two members, Fab Morvan and Rob Pilatus, had multiple chart-topping hits in the 80s, but during a performance at the Lake Compound's theme park, their backing track skipped, exposing them as lip syncers who could barely speak English. In truth, all their songs were actually performed by various other singers. Their sales plummeted after the incident and they were shunned by the public, with only a few songs and albums being released afterwards, which sold incredibly poorly. After years of psychological recovery, in 1997 the duo got back together to record a comeback album titled Back in Attack as the newly formed The Real Milli Vanilli. But in the meantime, Rob Pilatus' life had had quite the Lifetime movie treatment of the generation. He'd abused drugs, committed robberies, and even terror threats. And unfortunately, the day before the album's promotional tour in 1998, Pilatus was found dead from an accidental drug overdose. Fab Morvan is still alive and well, and miraculously enough, so is his career. Turns out, he has a pretty decent voice. So, there is still a chance that Back in Attack sessions might see the light of day at some point, but it might not be the face of Milli Vanilli reciting the tracks. On a lighter note, a number of Mysterio's live performances were collected as unreleased songs by the LA-based pop-rock group I'm a Robot, which featured Alexander Ebert, now a known member of Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros, responsible for what might be my least favorite song of all time. A lot of the demos had a more experimental style, ranging from hip-hop to alt-rock, so like typical 90s alt-pop. And side note for a second, what was it with these late 90s watered-down alternative bands? Did no one survive the one-hit wonder curse of 1997? Pretentious, audacious music critics claimed that the scene was a trash fire, but I don't know, I kinda like it. In the defense of all pop, in this essay, I will. Several 1999 demos from the band's early years have been found and uploaded. A woman's voice can be heard speaking in the background of the recording, but it's unknown if it was intentional or not. Apparently, they were all in a cassette that was in a mix of old songs, which was found and somehow transferred digitally. The original uploaded received the songs from a girl he'd met on MySpace, who claimed her mom was formerly friends with Ebert. I mean, that's one way to slide in them DMs, right? An album of instrumentals was reportedly found and its artwork was posted, but never any music, weirdly enough. It has since disappeared again, along with a series of songs only performed live and several demo tapes which eventually made it in other releases. And we can only hope the uploader and Ebert's friend's daughter have made it to date number 2. And if you want to have the same success on your quest for love, I recommend not putting the following track on your sweetheart's mixtape. Not like you can anyway, cause it's lost. Even I'm forgetting the point of this video, geez. Pretty Fly for a Rabbi is a parody of The Offspring's Pretty Fly for a White Guy, Weird Al Yankovic's official remix of the song from the album Running with Scissors. I am only excusing the cringiness in this pun in particular because it's Weird Al and he gets a cringy free pun pass. This remix was released only on the Yahoo Music site as part of a contest promotion with a company that produced the remix software Beatnik and never appeared elsewhere. Honestly, Yahoo Music could be a part of this Iceberg itself, probably at the bottom tier because I mean none of you have heard of it, right? And if you're confused by this entry, here's a rough translation of what all of this means. The remix of a parody of a pop-punk song from 1999 was lost in the cyberpunk utopia that was the Internet 1.0. And for a more grassroots approach, all-country band Whiskey Town's third and final album took 3 years to record as a result of the band members fighting, causing over 100 finished songs to be scrapped. Due to the stress and wasted production resources on the project, the band was dropped by their label Polygram Records. Good riddance toxicity. By the time the record Pneumonia, get it, 'cause toxic, was released in 2001, it had already been leaked and bootlegged, and the band members had long gone their separate ways. The vast majority of the 100 songs that were produced remain lost or unreleased. They're currently owned by the band members who refuse to ever get back together again and revisit the material. Just like the 3 songs that were recorded for Pavement's last album, Terror Twilight, that have also never been released. They preceded the Vampire novels by like 10 years, don't worry. 2 of the songs were actually illegal for the band to release or reissue due to copyrighted samples and ownership rights. One of them even made it to a Dutch TV show that actually documented the entire songwriting process as well as the final performance. Talk about irony. We still don't know why the last song, Days, is unreleased though. So as Stephanie Meyer's supernatural romance sees its own renaissance, we can only hope Pavement will too. And maybe so will Control Denied. Control Denied was a progressive metal band started in 1996 by Chuck Schuldiner of Death, also known as the godfather of death metal. After completing records for their debut album, he began writing music for a second record, titled When Man and Machine Collide, but production had to stop when Schuldiner died as a result of a brain tumor. Other members of the band expressed their wish to complete the album, but it was ultimately deemed too enormous a task and abandoned after technical difficulties, with others recalling that Schuldiner had said that the album shouldn't be completed if it couldn't be done the way he'd imagined it. And for anyone still watching, the same goes for any videos I leave unfinished in case the Grim Reaper finds me. And just so you know, Cigarettes and Valentines will be the name of my college memoir, even if it was supposed to be the follow-up to Green Day's album Warning first. Hey, they didn't use it. The whole album was recorded and ready for release until it was apparently stolen from Green Day's studio. The band tried to re-record it, but they were never satisfied with the results, so the project was scrapped, and they made American Idiot instead. They made peace with the outcome in the end and were even happy about it in retrospect, given the quality and success of the LP despite the inciting incident. In a shocking twist worthy of my college memoir, it was later revealed that the band did have the backup of these sessions, but weren't interested in finishing the album, with only one B-side eventually making it to the release. And I mean, if early aughts Green Day thought it was bad, it must have been truly atrocious. Definitely worse than whatever former BIS members reunited to release in 2005 as Data Panic. They recorded an album's worth of material, but it never made it to the public. Many of the songs were eventually re-released by BIS or members in other projects. 4 of the studio recordings from the Data Panic sessions, though, have not been recovered aside from some live versions. Do the Static, Figure It Out, I Love to Love You, and Key Changer. And yes, there's some real panic to be had here since confusion about the tracks runs rampant. For starters, Do the Static has only been heard in sporadic live performances. We don't know if Figure It Out was even recorded in the first place. I Love to Love You might be the same song as Love to Love You from BIS's 2003 album Return to Central, and Love to Hate You, aka Key Changer, could be the one from former member Mandarin's solo album. So honestly, I'm feeling pretty confused about this one too. And our next entry is a little bit heavier. Recording had already started for Deftones' Eros, which was going to be the 6th LP by the alt-metal band, when bassist Chi Chang was involved in a serious car accident and sadly slipped into a coma. Upon Chang's eventual death from cardiac arrest, the band cancelled the record. A few demos have come out, but only one completed track from the record has ever been leaked by the band, which was taken down by their label due to copyright infringement. Yes, really. The album remains almost completely lost, but the band has said that they do want to release it eventually, which could be a real treat to NEG fans. Living up to its name, the now lost Ghost EP was a 3-track EP by Nintendo metalcore band Horse the Band that was subject to a very limited release of around 250 copies in 2008, the only year where a Nintendo metalcore band would have had enough clout to pull this off. As karma would have had it, the band claims to have lost all of the unsold copies while in transit to Turkey. Their digital master copies, on the other hand, were also lost during a hard drive reformat of a few months later. Maybe the ghost didn't want to be found. Or subject to the laws of power, the inspiration behind the name of an unreleased album by Memphis-based hip-hop group 3 6 Mafia, probably because the majority of the members were already gone by the time the recording was finished. And yeah, the major failure of their previous album Last to Walk slowed this one down to a crawl too. The initial release date kept getting pushed back until it was finally scrapped. despite 3 singles and numerous collaborations being planned for it with the likes of Tiesto, Rodney Darkchild Jerkins, and Kevin Rudolph. A few tracks online claim to be from the album, but it's unknown if this was the case. Though we'd like to think they are indeed still in the running, like the potential suitors alluded to in the track Mama's Boyfriend, addressed to the man that his mother had dated during childhood, originally intended for Kanye's 2010 album My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. Instrumentals were produced by Madlib, but were later replaced by others made by Q-Tip, the frontman of hip-hop group A Tribe Called Quest. It was first performed a cappella during West's 2010 visit to the Facebook offices in Silicon Valley, but never made it to the album. An unofficial instrumental was leaked with the actual vocals in 2011, like the other ambiguous Kanye track Black Bruce Wayne, which were discussed in the last episode. When Q-Tip played this version at the Red Bull Music Academy 2 years later, he mentioned there was yet another version of the track produced by Soulja Boy. None of these variations have ever seen the light of day, mirroring the disappearing boyfriends of Mama West. And the next song on our list, courtesy of eclectic musician and artist James Ferraro, who produced a series of new age and psychedelic albums which he dubbed the Summer Headrush series in 2009. They were distributed via homemade CDRs, and unlike the hundreds of random demos James has put out, some of these have yet to resurface. A few have been shared on the James Ferraro Discord by people in their possession. A whole album called Rehysteria, described by James Ferraro's prehistoric rewind in IMAX audio, was never released, and only one track was since leaked in 2017. Who knows, maybe they'll finally be put out 20 years from now in an interesting post-ironic statement that comments on the nostalgia of the past, while it was a future as imagined from an alternate timeline in which they were public and never unreleased all along. In 2008, alt-rock band Switchfoot announced that they had 4 albums worth of material recorded and ready to go. The first to come out of this batch was 2000's Hello Hurricane, but 2 years later, none of the others had emerged, despite much attended anticipation and demand by fans and critics alike. Unable to find a distributor, the band re-recorded all their music for the second album of the series, which was the significantly weaker Vice Versus. Not sure how this one managed to be worse than their album that they literally called The Beautiful Letdown. It's unclear why they abandoned the recordings from the Hurricane sessions, leading many to question the reported existence of the songs in the first place and to consider this all a publicity stunt, or a Switchfoot. Can I use that word for a sudden disaster? Because in that case, our next Switchfoot is Sea Shepherd, a charity EP from progressive metal band Gojira that we lost to a hard drive crash. A modern tragedy, if you will. I really should be getting sponsored by a cloud client at this point. This is bleak. The band worked on recovering the files and re-recording some material, but only one song ever resurfaced, Of Blood and Salt. The rest is permanently lost and corrupted in the demonic ether of Gojira's files. Time for greener pastures. Folksy Fleet Foxes' second critically acclaimed album was released in 2011, and it was quite the stylistic evolution. Helplessness Blues had a lengthy and troubled production, costing $60,000 and taking 3 years to finalize. And they gave Loveless a hard time. Lead vocalist Robert Pecknold deemed the initial recordings too close in style to the band's debut album and scrapped them entirely. Once the band members got back together and re-recorded it, the album took a much different lyrically and instrumentally driven musical direction. We don't know if the finished album was made up of the original tracks reworked or if it's something completely different. And none of the mysterious older demo tracks have ever been released, officially or unofficially. The moral of the story is thus: don't name ambitious albums after unpleasant feelings of dread. And dread must have been exactly what American rapper XXXTentacion also felt when he began to upload his music in the file-sharing website SoundCloud before releasing his first album, 17. Some of these SoundCloud demos were eventually lost or deleted. Fans have since sought to purchase the songs collectively after Tentacion's murder in 2018. And we can only hope that they will be released in whatever format allows them to best honor his memory at some point. And tragedy struck again when Lee Scratch Perry's studio, which he called the Secret Lab, burned down in late 2015, and he lost countless hours of unreleased music, among other things. This was the second time this happened to Perry, who also lost another studio in the 70s to a fire as well, which allegedly happened after he burned it down on purpose himself in a fit of rage. And not sure about you, but this qualifies as a little bit more than a scratch in my book. And we're ending with the trademark British teen pop that somehow has plagued all my videos. The final version of the English girl group Little Mix's song Dancing with Nobody had a few contenders, amongst which were K-pop group Red Velvet, who ended up snatching it and releasing it as their own song, Red Flavor. This riveting origin story was revealed by producers Daniel Caesar and Ludwig Lindell in a 2017 interview. No copy of the English demo exists, but I for one can appreciate a different flavor in the mix. I'm gonna stop. This is the end, so I was gonna stop anyway. And on that pitiful pun note, I'll leave you to hopefully find your way back and speculate with me more on the next installment of our deep dive into lost music. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel to keep up with this crazy journey and know exactly when the next video will be up. On the next episode, we'll discover even more obscure projects. Those that are 100% lost, irretrievably, with no hope whatsoever of getting them back. A special thanks to the patrons supporting the channel, Paul Tannenholtz, Budog18, and Matthew Gilman. If you also want to get your name in the credits, get early uncensored access and exclusive future episodes and bonus streams, consider joining us on there to satisfy your cravings. Follow us on Twitter to keep up behind the scenes, and check out the Spotify playlist below to descend deep down the lost music iceberg. We'll see you soon for more stories behind the music.